Our Italian reporter Alessia De Santis used her time at culturel Persbureau to go on a personal quest. She went to Ruigoord, Amersfoort, Amsterdam, Ede, and Milan to find out what makes art accessible and human. Her view, as an outsider, adds a refreshing insight into a culture that is completely familiar to us, the Dutch. This is the Culture Press Podcast, a special edition by Alessia De Santis. Opening and closing tune by Mace Rijken. I am Callum, an AI voice based on a human speaker.
If you have been listening to this season, you have heard 3 very different stories. A dancer carrying a history her body remembers even when no archive does. 2 communities that built their own spaces because nobody handed them one. And, most recently, 2 theaters on 2 different edges of 2 different cities, both trying to figure out who a theater is actually for. 3 stories, different cities, and a whole set of voices. This one makes 4, except that this time it's just me. I want to start with 2 versions of myself, 3 years apart. I covered my first arts festival in 2023 at the Spanish Embassy in Rome. I was 23, finishing my master's. There was all the formality of a diplomatic institution, and somewhere in the middle of that, the art still had to find its way through. I remember feeling out of place for most of it, notebook in hand, wondering if I actually had the right to be standing there. I'm 26 now, and something is different. Not just the country, but me. I have more confidence, and I know how to do this job. In the Netherlands, I started turning up at places unannounced, the way I never would have in Rome. This is what happened at OostWest in Amersfoort. An industrial container converted into studios and workspaces, in an area that doesn't promise much at a first glance. I walked in without really knowing what to expect, and Rob, one of the founders, simply let me in. He talked to me about the project as if we had known each other for a while, and he introduced me to the artist working there. No confirmation email, no protocol. Just someone opening a door because I knocked. He told me that this is exactly what happens to anyone who shows up at OostWest. That's how the space is meant to work.
So what would happen if we have a space that's just the space that is just for creativity, you know? Where you can walk in, but you don't necessarily have to, like, I don't know, like buy a drink or something, but where you can just come in and have the space, have creativity fill the space, and what happens when you orient from that perspective.
Part of that shift was me. But the more interviews I did this season, the more I realized it wasn't only me. Long before I had the confidence to knock on a door unannounced, I had the theoretical toolkit that told me what to listen for when someone let me in. And 3 ideas from it kept resurfacing, episode after episode, whether or not I ever said their names on air. The first is Anne Chekhovich's notion of an archive of feelings. The idea that certain experiences, especially those tied to marginal communities, leave their most durable traces not in official documents, but in atmosphere, gesture, tone of voice.
People like Bessel van der Kolk, who did a lot of trauma research, come to this conclusion that you might need a bodily activity, action, or yoga or theater. We need to do embodied work because it's a different dimension, and also a spiritual dimension, which is something that in Western thought we had discarded completely.
The second, running through the work of Sarah Ahmed and Lauren Berlant, is the idea that spaces and communities are held together by circulating affects, belonging, attachment, nostalgia, resentment, rather than by institutions alone. Every time I interviewed someone inside an artist community or a grassroots initiative, I was listening less for facts and dates than for these undercurrents. What does it feel like to belong somewhere the wider city has, at some point, tried to push out? The third is Pierre Bourdieu's account of cultural capital, the unequal distribution of legitimate access to culture. That gave me the vocabulary for a question that came up in almost every conversation I had this year. Who gets to make art, who gets recognized as an artist, and who is merely allowed to visit? You heard it explicitly in the Pimov and Zid episode.
So we understand that actually under all these problems where you have the worst neighborhood, I don't know if it's now officially, but it's not so much better, I can tell you, it's poverty. It's poverty. It's most of the problem is that people are just very poor, and because you are very poor, you don't have access to nothing.
Yeah, especially to culture in
you
general.
You cannot provide to your children nothing, and you have to take care to survive. And most of the people survive of regular way, and some go on the wrong path because there is no other way.
That's why I never treated a site visit as a color added afterwards. It was the research. What I didn't expect going into this season was how consistent the answer would turn out to be across 3 completely different topics. Nobody I spoke to treated inclusion as a slogan or a gesture. Every one of them treated it as a specific piece of infrastructure, a voucher system, a government's argument, a workshop that took months to build, a course priced against an income indicator instead of a flat fee. Belonging, turns out, is not a feeling an institution announces. It is a series of decisions an institution keeps having to make over and over, usually with very little glory attached to any of them. If there's a single thesis running under this whole season, I think it's this: the right to belong to a cultural space, to enter it, to be remembered by it, to help building it, is never actually free, even when the door is. Somebody, somewhere, is doing the work of holding the door open. None of the people I spoke to this season described that work as charity. Every one of them, in their own words, described it as something closer to justice, a correction to an arrangement that was never actually fair to begin with. I came into this project trained to ask these questions on paper, with footnotes and qualifications, and room to come back to an idea 3 paragraphs later. This season has been an attempt to ask the same questions out loud, in real time, to people who don't get a second draft. I don't think the question got any smaller for it. If anything, I think they got harder to look away from.
Thank you for listening to this special English edition of the Culture Press podcast. You can find most of our material in Dutch, English and French on our website, culturepers.nl, or on Substack at newsbrief.culturepers.nl.